The night before my sister's wedding, I stayed awake until 2 in the morning fixing a mistake in the seating chart that no one had asked me to fix. That was simply what I did. In my family, I was the one who fixed things, and I had played that part so quietly, for so long, that I had nearly forgotten a daughter could be given any other. I understood the arrangement long before anyone said it out loud. My younger sister, Amelia, was the one they kept for the love. She was beautiful in the easy, effortless way that makes people forgive a great deal. And from the time she could walk, she had been forgiven a great deal. I was the other one, the capable one, the one who remembered the appointments, balanced the accounts, soothed the clients, and quietly fixed the things my father broke before anyone important noticed they were broken. My mother had a phrase she used about us. At parties, when she had drunk a little wine and wanted to seem warm, "Amelia is our heart," she would say, laughing, "and Claire is our head." Everyone always smiled at that. No one ever seemed to notice that a heart gets flowers and a head gets a to-do list. I had stopped minding it. Mostly, when you grow up being the head and not the heart, you learn the value of a clear mind. You learn to watch. You learn to see the shape of things before other people do. And by the morning of my sister's wedding, I had been seeing the shape of one particular thing for a long time. And it frightened me more than anyone in my family understood. The thing I had been watching was the slow, quiet collapse of my father's company. Sterling and Company had been founded by my grandmother, my father's mother, a hard and brilliant woman who had died when I was 19, and who had been the only person in my childhood who ever looked at me and saw a person rather than a function. She had left the company to my father because he was her son, and that was simply how things were done. She had left me something else, something quieter, which I will come to later. My father had spent the years since her death slowly running the company she built into the ground. Through a mix of vanity, poor judgment, and a deep and unshakable belief that money would always appear when he needed it. Because it always had. By the time I was old enough to understand the books, the company was carrying debt it could not pay, propped up by loans it could not afford, kept breathing only by the careful, invisible work of a daughter no one knew was doing it. That daughter was me. For 3 years, I had been the one who actually wrote the company's letters, drafted its proposals, managed its real negotiations, and kept its most important clients from walking away. I did it all under my father's name, because that was the only name anyone would listen to, and because keeping the company alive mattered more to me than getting the credit. There were 200 people who worked for Sterling and Company, 200 families. My grandmother's name was on the door. I was not going to let my father's vanity put all of that on the street. And the one thing, the single thing, that stood between Sterling and Company and total ruin was the wedding that was supposed to happen that morning. My sister Amelia was engaged to a man named Julian Hawthorne. The Hawthorne family was old money and serious money, the kind that did not collapse, the kind that owned pieces of a dozen industries and answered to no one. Julian Hawthorne ran the whole of it, and had since he was very young, and he had a reputation for being cold, precise, and entirely without sentiment in business. The marriage between Amelia and Julian was not a love match. It was an alliance. The Hawthorne Group would absorb Sterling and Company's debts and fold the firm into its operations as part of the marriage arrangement, saving the company, saving the jobs, saving my grandmother's name. In exchange, the Hawthorne family would gain certain assets, certain contracts, and the kind of respectable old name that money cannot quite buy on its own. My father had been beside himself with relief when the engagement was settled. He believed, as he always believed, that money had simply appeared because he needed it. He did not know, and never asked, how much careful work I had done behind the scenes to make the Hawthorne family see any value in us at all. Amelia had agreed to the marriage with a sulky shrug. She did not love Julian Hawthorne. She found him cold and dull. But the Hawthorne wealth was beyond anything our family had, and Amelia had always understood the value of comfort. So she had agreed, and the wedding had been arranged, and everything that 200 families depended on rested on my beautiful younger sister saying 2 words in a church. On the morning of the wedding, my sister was gone. I found the note first. Because of course I did. I was the one who went to wake her. The one who always handled the difficult mornings. Her room was empty. The bed had not been slept in. Her largest suitcase was missing. And so was the jewelry our mother kept in the safe, whose combination Amelia was not supposed to know. And so, I would learn within the hour. Was a great deal of money from an account that should not have been so easy for her to reach. The note was on her pillow, written in her loose, careless hand. I cannot marry a man I do not love. It read, Marcus and I are going away together. Please understand. Tell Julian I am sorry. Amelia. Marcus. I knew the name. Marcus was a charming, handsome, entirely unreliable man. Amelia had been quietly seeing for months. A man with expensive tastes and no visible means of paying for them. A man my mother had decided was a harmless flirtation that Amelia would grow out of once she was safely married. I had tried. Once. To warn my mother that Marcus was the kind of man who finds rich girls and lives on them until the money runs out. My mother had told me not to be jealous. I stood in my sister's empty room, holding the note, and I felt the whole structure of 200 families' lives begin to slide toward the edge. I went downstairs and told my parents. What followed was the loudest hour of my family's life. My mother wept and shouted by turns. My father went gray, then red, then gray again. He understood, in a way Amelia never had, exactly what her absence meant. Without the marriage, the Hawthorne alliance collapsed. Without the alliance, the debts came due, without the debts being absorbed. Sterling and Company had perhaps 3 months of life left in it, and then nothing. The wedding was in 4 hours, 300 guests, the Hawthorne family, Julian Hawthorne himself. We are ruined, my father kept saying, sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. We are ruined. That stupid, selfish girl has ruined all of us. And it was in that hour, in that kitchen, with the morning light coming hard through the windows and my mother's makeup running down her face, that my mother turned, slowly, and looked at me. I knew the look. I had been seeing versions of it my whole life. It was the look that came just before someone handed me a problem to fix. But this time the look went on a little too long, and a little too still, and a strange new calculation came into my mother's eyes. Claire, she said. Just my name. Just that. My father lifted his head. The 2 of them looked at me, sitting there in my plain gray dress, the responsible daughter, the head and not the heart. And I watched the same idea arrive in both of their minds at the same moment. No, I said quietly, although I already knew it would not matter. You are the same age, my mother said slowly. Near enough. The dress can be altered. It is only a few hours. The seamstress is still here. The guests have not met Amelia in years. Half of them barely know what she looks like. The Hawthornes have only met her a handful of times. The contracts. The contracts named the Sterling daughter. Your father said so. Your father said the language was the Sterling daughter. It names the eldest daughter, my father said, his voice rising with a terrible new hope. Hawthorne's lawyers wrote it carefully. It names the eldest Sterling daughter, Claire. It was always Claire. We only assumed it meant Amelia because Amelia was the one we... He stopped. The room was very quiet. I sat at the kitchen table and I understood. With a clarity that was almost peaceful. that my family was about to ask me to marry a stranger in 4 hours to save them all, and that they were going to frame it as the responsible thing. The family thing. The thing the head does for the heart. And that they fully expected me to say yes, because I had spent 26 years saying yes. And here is the thing I have never told anyone. The thing that changed everything that came after. I had already decided to do it. Not for them. I want to be very clear about that. Not for my weeping mother or my gray-faced father or my selfish runaway sister. I had decided to do it in the 3 seconds after my mother said my name. And I had decided it for 200 families, and for my grandmother's name on a door, and for the years of quiet work I was not about to watch wash away because of a girl who could not see past a charming man with empty pockets. But I was not going to do it the way they expected. I was not going to do it as the grateful, frightened, sacrificial daughter, pushed forward to take a humiliation that belonged to someone else. I was going to do it with my eyes open, as a decision, as a transaction I understood better than anyone else in that kitchen, and I was going to make sure that this time, for the first time in my life, the head did not work for free. I stood up. "Get the seamstress," I said. My mother burst into fresh tears of relief and reached for me. I stepped back, just slightly, just enough. "There will be conditions," I said. "We will discuss them after. Right now, get the seamstress, and someone telephone the Hawthorne family and tell them the wedding will proceed as planned. Do not tell them anything else. I will handle the rest." My father stared at me as if he had never seen me before. In a way, he never had. 4 hours later, in my sister's altered dress, with my sister's flowers in my hands, I stood at the back of a church full of people who had come to watch a different woman get married. And I looked down the long aisle at the man waiting for me at the front. Julian Hawthorne. I had never formally met him. I had only seen him once, across a room, at a dinner I had attended in my father's place. He was tall, and still, and entirely composed, in a dark suit, with dark eyes that did not move from my face as I began to walk toward him. I braced myself for the humiliation. I was certain of it. A powerful man, publicly handed the wrong sister, the lesser sister, the head and not the heart, at his own wedding, in front of 300 people. He would be cold. He would be furious behind his calm. He might even stop it, walk out, let the whole thing collapse in scandal. I would not have blamed him. I walked toward him with my chin level and my eyes steady, ready for whatever his face would do when he realized that the woman coming down the aisle was not the woman he had agreed to marry. I reached the front of the church. I looked up into his face, and Julian Hawthorne looked back at me, and he was not surprised at all. He was not surprised. I want you to understand how strange that was. I had spent 4 hours preparing myself for the moment when Julian Hawthorne's composed face would crack, when he would see that the wrong sister had arrived, when the cold, powerful man would have to decide, in front of 300 people, whether to swallow a public humiliation or cause a public disaster. But when I reached the front of the church and looked up at him, his face did not crack. It did not flicker. There was no shock in it. No anger. No scramble of calculation. He looked down at me with his still dark eyes, and what I saw in them was not surprise. It was recognition. It was the look of a man who had been expecting exactly the person who had arrived. I did not have time to understand it. The ceremony began. I said the words I was supposed to say. He said the words he was supposed to say, in a low, even voice, without hesitation. He took my hand to put the ring on it, and his hand was warm and steady. And when the official told him he could kiss the bride, he leaned down and pressed his lips, very briefly and very correctly, to the corner of my mouth. And then he straightened, and it was done. I was married to a man I had never spoken a single word to. The reception passed in a blur of strangers. I smiled. I shook hands. I accepted congratulations from people who believed I was Amelia, and from people who knew I was not and were too well bred to say so. My mother floated through the room in a state of giddy relief. My father drank too much and laughed too loudly, and told everyone how proud he was. The picture of a man whose fortunes had just been saved by a daughter he had remembered existed only that morning. Through all of it, Julian Hawthorne stayed close to me, his hand light at my back, saying little, his presence somehow making the strangers easier to bear. He did not perform affection. He did not pretend we were in love. But he stood beside me in a way that made it clear, to every watching eye, that I was his wife and that he had chosen to stand there. It was not until late that evening, when the guests had gone and we were finally alone, in the quiet study of the Hawthorne estate that was now, somehow, my home, that he spoke to me as a person for the first time. He poured 2 glasses of water, handed me one, and sat down in the chair across from mine. He did not sit close. He understood distance. I was grateful for that. "You are not what your family thinks you are," he said. It was not a question. I did not answer it. He studied me for a moment. "You expected me to be angry today," he said. "When you walked down that aisle, I saw it in your face. You expected humiliation. You braced for it the entire way down the church." I considered lying. I decided not to. I had decided, somewhere in the last 4 hours, that I was finished spending my honesty on people who had not earned it. But this man had stood beside me all day without once making me feel like a replacement, and that had earned him something. "Yes," I said, "I expected you to be furious that you had been handed the wrong sister." Julian Hawthorne set down his glass. "You were not the wrong sister," he said. The room went very still. "I do not understand," I said. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he told me a thing that rearranged my entire understanding of the day, and of the last 3 years of my life. "For 3 years," he said, "I have been doing business with Sterling and Company. You know this. What you may not know is that for 3 years, I have been corresponding with someone at Sterling and Company whose mind I came to respect more than almost anyone I have ever worked with. The letters were signed by your father. The proposals carried his name. The negotiations were conducted under his authority. But the person writing those letters was not your father. Your father is not capable of writing those letters. I knew that within the first month. I could not breathe. It took me almost 2 years," he said, "to confirm who I was actually corresponding with. I am thorough. I do not like mysteries in my business. And what I found, when I finally found it, was a daughter, the eldest Sterling daughter, a woman who had been quietly keeping a sinking company afloat for years, under her father's name, for no credit and no thanks. Because 200 families depended on it, and because her grandmother's name was on the door. He held my eyes. When my family pressed me to make an alliance with the Sterlings, he said, everyone assumed it would be a marriage to the younger daughter, the pretty one, the one the family showed off. That was the arrangement your father proposed, and the arrangement my family expected. And I let them all believe it, because it was simpler, and because the contract language did not actually matter to me the way it mattered to them. "The contract named the eldest daughter," I whispered. "Yes," Julian said. "I wrote that clause myself. My lawyers thought it was a technicality. Your father thought it was a technicality. Your sister certainly never read it. I wrote it because I had no interest in marrying a girl who could not see past a charming man with empty pockets. I wrote it because the only person in your entire family worth building an alliance with was the one no one ever looked at. I did not know, this morning, that your sister would run, but I will tell you honestly, Claire, that when the call came saying the wedding would proceed, I was not disappointed. I was relieved. He sat back. So no, he said, you were not the wrong sister. You were the only sister I ever wanted at this table. Your family handed me the person they thought was worthless, and they believed they were tricking me. They were not. They were giving me the only thing of value they had, and they did not even know it. I sat in that quiet study, in my sister's altered wedding dress, married to a stranger who had just told me that he had chosen me for my mind, when no one in my life had ever chosen me for anything except my usefulness. And I did something I had not done in front of another person in many years. I had to look away, because my eyes had filled, and I did not want him to see it. When I had control of myself again, I looked back at him. You said there would be conditions, he said gently. Your mother mentioned it on the phone. In a panic. You told them there would be conditions, and then you handled everything else. I have been curious all day what they are. I lifted my chin. I will not be a decoration. I said, I will not be a grateful nobody kept in a beautiful house. I helped keep that company alive for 3 years, and I understand it better than anyone living, including you. With respect, if we are going to be partners in this alliance, I want to actually be a partner, in the business, in the decisions, not a wife who is shown at dinners and sent away when the men talk. That is my condition. Julian Hawthorne looked at me for a long moment. And then, for the first time all day, something in his still face changed. He smiled. That, he said, is not a condition. Claire, that is the entire reason I married you. The Hawthorne estate was a house of glass and stone and silence, beautiful in the way that very expensive things are beautiful, which is to say a little cold, a little untouchable, designed to be admired rather than lived in. I moved through it in those first days like a guest in a museum, learning its rooms, its rhythms, its people. There were a great many people, staff who kept the great house running, who had served the Hawthorne family for years, who watched the new wife with a careful, professional neutrality that gave nothing away. There were 2 of them, however, who mattered more than the rest, and I learned them quickly. Because learning people quickly is the one skill being invisible teaches you. The first was the housekeeper, a stout, sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Doyle, who ran the household the way a good captain runs a ship. On my second morning, when I came down early, before anyone expected me, and found my own way to the kitchen, and made my own cup of tea, and thanked the kitchen staff by name because I had bothered to learn their names, I saw Mrs. Doyle watching me from the doorway with an expression I could not read. The next morning, there was a small plate of almond biscuits set beside my tea. Without my having asked, it was a small thing, in a house of glass. Small kindnesses are how the staff tell you what they have decided about you. Mrs. Doyle had decided something about me, and it was good. The second person who mattered was the woman at the head of the family. Julian's grandmother was named Iris Hawthorne, and she was. I understood within 5 minutes of meeting her the true power behind everything the Hawthorne name touched. She was past 80, small and straight-backed, with white hair pinned up and dark eyes exactly like her grandson's. And she missed nothing, absolutely nothing. She reminded me so much of my own grandmother that the first time she fixed those dark eyes on me, I felt an unexpected ache of grief for a woman 10 years gone. She summoned me to tea on my 4th day, not Julian and me, just me. I went up to her rooms, which were full of light and books and plants, so unlike the cold glass below, and I sat across from her, and she poured tea with hands that did not shake, and she looked at me for a long time before she spoke. So, she said at last, "You are the one he chose." I did not know how to answer that, so I said nothing. "He told you, then," She said, "About the letters. About finding out who was really running that company." "He told me." I said, "Good." She said, "He was right to. A marriage built on a secret is a house built on sand. And I have buried enough Hawthorne men who built on sand." She took a sip of her tea. "I will tell you something, Claire, because I think you are the sort of person who would rather have the truth than the comfort. My grandson is a difficult man. He is cold, because his father was cruel. And a boy learns to put ice over the places that have been burned. He does not trust easily. He does not choose easily. In all the years I have watched him, I have never once seen him choose a person the way he chose you. He did not choose a face. He did not choose a name. He chose a mind and a character. Sight almost unseen. Over 3 years of letters. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand what it means?" "I think I am beginning to," I said quietly. She nodded slowly. "He chose carefully." She said, "He always does. Do not waste it by being smaller than you are. This family has had enough decorative wives. It needs a wife with a spine." She set down her cup. I had begun to think I would die before I saw one walk through that door. I left her rooms that afternoon feeling as though I had been weighed and measured, and, for once in my life, not found wanting. The business came soon after. Julian had meant what he said. He did not keep me out of the rooms where the men talked. The very first week, he brought home a thick folder of documents relating to the Sterling and Company merger, the legal absorption of my father's failing firm into the Hawthorne Group, and he laid it on the table between us in his study and said, simply, "Tell me what I am missing." I read it that night, all of it, and in the small hours of the morning, I found it, buried deep in the merger documents, in language designed to be skimmed past. There was a clause that my father's lawyers had inserted, a clause that quietly shifted the responsibility for a particular set of the company's hidden liabilities onto the Hawthorne Group after the merger completed, in a way that the Hawthorne lawyers, who did not know Sterling and Company's books the way I knew them, had not flagged as dangerous. It was the kind of thing my father would do, not quite fraud, not quite honest, a small greedy sleight of hand, tucked into the fine print, designed to make his own escape from his own debts a little softer at someone else's expense. In the morning, I showed it to Julian. I watched his face as he read it, as he understood it, as he saw that I had caught in one night a thing his expensive lawyers had missed entirely. When he looked up at me, the cold composure was gone, replaced by something sharper and more alive. "Your father tried to hide this," he said. "My father tries to hide everything." I said, "It is how he has survived this long. I am not defending it. I am only telling you that if you are going to be in business with the Sterlings, you need someone who can read what they write underneath what they write. You need me." Julian Hawthorne looked at me across that table, in the cold glass house, and for the second time, he smiled. "I keep being told," he said, "that I made a brilliant marriage. They mean it as a joke, because they think I was tricked." He shook his head slowly. "They have no idea. I want to tell you about the letters, because they are the heart of everything, and because of all the strange things that happened in my second life. The letters are the thing I think about most. For 3 years, before I ever stood in that church, I had been writing to Julian Hawthorne without knowing his face. I did not know it was him. At the start, I knew only that there was a correspondent at the Hawthorne Group, signing as J. Hawthorne, whose letters were unlike any business letters I had ever read. They were precise and dry, and occasionally, beneath the precision, very slightly funny, in a way that I do not think the writer entirely intended. They cut straight to the truth of every matter. They never wasted a word. They never flattered. And they never lied. And in the long gray years of holding my father's company, together with both hands, those letters had become, without my ever admitting it to myself, the one piece of my working life that I looked forward to. I had written back as my father, of course, as H. Sterling, but I had written back honestly, because the correspondent on the other end was clearly too sharp to be fooled by anything less. And because there was a strange freedom in being honest under another name. I had argued with him. I had pushed back on terms I thought were unfair. I had once, in a letter, told H. Sterling's correspondent that a particular proposal was, and I quote my own younger self, an elegant solution to a problem that does not exist, and a clumsy ignoring of the problem that does. I had agonized for an hour before sending that line. The reply had come back 2 days later. It had said only, "You are right. The proposal is withdrawn. Send me your version," and under it, for the first and only time in 3 years, the correspondent had added a single line that was not strictly business. It had said, "It is a pleasure to argue with someone who is actually thinking." I had read that line more times than I will admit. I had built, without ever meaning to, a kind of friendship with a person I had never met, conducted entirely on paper, under a false name, in the margins of a job that was slowly grinding me down. It had been, in those gray years, one of the few things that made me feel like a mind and not a machine. And now I knew that the person on the other end of those letters had been Julian Hawthorne. And I knew that he had figured out, long before I had any idea, that the person on my end was not my father but me, and I knew that for at least a year before our wedding. He had been corresponding not with H. Sterling, but knowingly, deliberately, with me, a young woman who did not know she had been discovered, and that he had let me keep my secret, and had gone on arguing with me, and respecting me. And I came slowly to understand, choosing me, one honest letter at a time. I asked him about it, one evening, near the end of the first month. "When did you know," I said, "that it was me, and not my father?" He was quiet for a moment. There was a letter. He said, "About 2 years ago, your father, you, had been negotiating a supply contract. The terms on the table were good for Sterling and Company in the short run and disastrous in the long run. And any ordinary person under that kind of financial pressure would have grabbed the short-term money and worried about later. Later, your father certainly would have. But the letter that came back refused the deal. It refused free money. In a company that desperately needed money, because the writer could see 3 years down the road and would not mortgage the future to survive the present. He looked at me. "That is not a thing a vain, failing man does," he said. "That is a thing a person of real character does." I read that letter, and I thought, whoever is actually writing these, it is not Howard Sterling. And then I thought, I would very much like to know who it is. So I found out. And once I knew, I could not unknow it. Every letter after that. I was writing to you. I told myself it was business. It was not entirely business. "Why did you never say anything?" I asked. "Why let me keep pretending?" "Because the pretending was keeping you safe," he said simply. "As long as the world believed Howard Sterling was the mind behind that company, your family had a reason to keep you, and a reason to value you. Even if they valued you for the wrong thing and never thanked you for it, if I had exposed you. I do not know what your father would have done. Men like your father do not forgive being shown up by their own daughters. So I waited. I built the alliance. I wrote the clause that named the eldest daughter, and I waited for a way to bring you out of that house without breaking you in the process." He paused. "I did not expect your sister to do the breaking for me," he said, "but I will not pretend I was sorry when she did." I sat with that for a long time. I had spent my whole life being seen as a function, the head, not the heart, the one you hand the problem to. And here was a man who had read my mind on paper for 3 years, before he ever saw my face, and had concluded, from my mind alone, that I was a person worth building a life around. It is a strange and disorienting thing, to be valued for the exact part of yourself that everyone else has always overlooked. It does not feel, at first, like happiness. It feels like vertigo, like standing up too fast after years of sitting in the dark. I am not going to tell you that I fell in love with Julian Hawthorne in that first month. I did not. I had spent too many years being careful for love to arrive that quickly. But I will tell you that in that first month, something began that was rarer and steadier than the kind of love that arrives quickly. A respect, a recognition, a sense, for the first time in my life, of being met. The love came later. It came slowly, the way the strongest things do, built letter by letter and decision by decision and quiet evening by quiet evening. Until one day I looked across a table at the cold, difficult, carefully chosen man I had married, and realized that the ice he showed the world had never once been turned toward me, and that somewhere in the long gray correspondence of our strange beginning, he had become the person I trusted most in the world. But that was later. First, my family had to discover that the daughter they had thrown away had become Mrs. Hawthorne. And then they came to take her back. They came the moment they understood what I had become. For the first few weeks after the wedding, my family had kept their distance, partly out of awkwardness over the runaway sister, partly because they were busy enjoying their rescue. The Hawthorne alliance had been announced. The merger was proceeding. The debts that had haunted my father were being quietly absorbed into something larger and stronger. Sterling and Company would survive. 200 families would keep their work. My grandmother's name would stay on the door. My father took all the credit, of course, in his version of events. He had brilliantly arranged a powerful marriage and saved the company through his own foresight. The small inconvenient detail that the bride had been the wrong daughter, hastily substituted after the right one fled, was smoothed over and forgotten. By the time a month had passed, I think my father had genuinely convinced himself that it had always been the plan. And then someone told my mother how the Hawthorne family spoke about me. Word travels in those circles. My mother had a friend whose daughter had married into a family connected to the Hawthornes. And through that friend, my mother heard the thing that changed everything. She heard that Julian Hawthorne, the cold and untouchable Julian Hawthorne, was said to dote on his new wife, that he consulted her on business. That old Iris Hawthorne, who had frightened 3 generations of society wives, had taken the new bride under her wing. That, the substitute daughter, the head and not the heart, had somehow landed not just safely, but spectacularly. My mother telephoned the next morning to invite herself to tea. They arrived that afternoon, my mother and father both, dressed in their finest, and the moment Doyle showed them into the bright sitting room where I had asked to receive them, I watched my mother's face do the thing I had been waiting 26 years to see it do. It opened toward me with warmth. "Claire, darling," she said, crossing the room with her arms out. "Oh, look at you. Look at this house. We have missed you so terribly." She had not missed me. She had not telephoned once in the month since the wedding except to ask, through my father, whether the merger was proceeding smoothly. But she crossed that bright room with her arms out and her face full of warmth, and she folded me into an embrace that, a month ago, would have made my chest ache with a longing I had carried my whole life. It did not make my chest ache anymore. I had been seen, really seen, by a stranger reading my letters. And somewhere in that seeing, the old desperate hunger for my mother's warmth had quietly let go of me. I returned her embrace politely, and I felt nothing but a clear, cool watchfulness. And I thought, you never reached for me once in my whole life, and now your arms are open. So this is what it looks like when I finally have something you want. We sat. Mrs. Doyle brought tea. My parents admired the house, the grounds, the view, my dress, my hair, my evident happiness. My father told a long story about how proud he was, how he had always known I would do well, how I had always been his clever girl. I let them talk. I had learned. From a difficult old woman 10 years dead, and a difficult man I had recently married. The great power of letting people talk. And then, as I had known he would, my father arrived at the reason for the visit. "Claire," he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping into the warm, confidential register he used when he wanted something, "I want to talk to you about the company, our company, the Sterling Company. Now that everything is being folded in with the Hawthornes, there are some details, some ways that things could be arranged that would be so much better for the family, for all of us. If you were to just have a quiet word with Julian, you understand the books. You always did. There are a few liabilities, a few old matters, that it would be so much cleaner to simply, to let fade away in the merger. No one would be hurt. It is just paperwork, and you are in such a position now to make sure the family is protected. Your own family." There it was. The same small, greedy sleight of hand I had caught in the merger documents in my first week. My father wanted me to use my position as Julian's wife to bury his old liabilities, to make his messes disappear into the Hawthorne accounts, to protect himself one more time at someone else's expense. And he was framing it, as he always framed everything, as a family duty. The head. Doing what the head does. For free. I looked at my father, and then I asked him a question I had been waiting a very long time to ask. "Father," I said, "what happened to grandmother's trust?" The room went still. My grandmother, the brilliant hard woman who had built Sterling and Company, and who had been the only person in my childhood to see me, had left a trust when she died. I had been 19. The trust had been set up, the lawyer had explained, for the benefit of both granddaughters, to be divided equally between Amelia and me when each of us turned 25. Amelia had reached 25. I had reached 25. Neither of us had ever seen a single coin of it. I had never asked. In all those years. Because asking was not the kind of thing the invisible daughter did. And because I had assumed, vaguely, that it was tied up in the company, but I had spent the last month reading documents with a free and fearless mind, in a house where no one could punish me for what I found, and I had finally, quietly, asked Mr. Harding? No, asked the Hawthorne family lawyer, to look into it. What he had found was this. The trust had been real. It had been substantial. And over the 6 years since my grandmother's death, it had been quietly, steadily drained, every withdrawal authorized by my father as trustee, every coin of it spent, not divided between 2 granddaughters, but funneled in its entirety into the maintenance of one, into Amelia's clothes, Amelia's cars, Amelia's holidays, Amelia's allowance, Amelia's charming and expensive friend Marcus. My half of my grandmother's last gift to me, the gift from the one person who ever saw me, had been spent, down to the last coin, on the sister who was kept for the love. I watched my father's face as he understood that I knew. I watched the warmth drain out of it, and the calculation rush in. "Now, Claire," he began, "that trust was complicated. There were family expenses. Your sister had needs. You were always so self-sufficient. You never needed—"
"I never needed," I repeated quietly.
And in those 2 words, 26 years of being the head and not the heart, the useful one, the self-sufficient one, the one who never needed, finally, quietly, came home to rest. I set down my teacup. "I am not going to have a quiet word with my husband about bearing your liabilities," I said. "The merger will proceed exactly as the Hawthorne lawyers and I have structured it, which means the company survives, and the 200 people who work there keep their jobs, and grandmother's name stays on the door. That part I have protected, because those people matter and that name matters. But your messes are your own. Father, I have cleaned up the last one I am ever going to clean up." My mother had gone white. My father had gone red. "You ungrateful!" My father started.
I stood up.
"Mrs. Doyle," I said, in a clear, calm voice, and the housekeeper appeared in the doorway so quickly that I knew she had been just outside it. "My parents are leaving now. Please see them out." And I watched my mother and father be shown out of the bright sitting room of the house their thrown-away daughter now lived in, and I felt no triumph, and no rage, only a strange, settled quiet, like the quiet after you finally set down something you have carried for so long that you had forgotten it was heavy. That night, I told Julian everything, about the trust, about my grandmother, about the half of her last gift to me that had been spent on a sister who had then run away and left me to marry in her place. He listened without interrupting, in the way he always did. When I had finished, he was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Your grandmother, the one whose name is on the door, tell me about her." And so I did. I talked, late into the night, about the one person in my childhood who had ever looked at me and seen a person. And Julian Hawthorne listened to every word. And at the end of it, he said a thing I have never forgotten. "She saw you," he said, "before any of them. She left you that trust because she saw exactly who you were, and she wanted you to have the means to be free. Your father stole the money, but he could not steal the thing she actually left you, which was being seen. That. You still have that. No one can drain." I did not cry that night, but it was a near thing. My sister came back in the autumn.
I had wondered, over those months, what had become of Amelia and her charming Marcus.
I had not searched for her. I had a company to help save and a life to learn how to live. And my runaway sister was not. I found a wound I needed to keep pressing, but I had wondered. The answer arrived one gray afternoon when Mrs. Doyle came to tell me, with a carefully neutral face, that there was a young woman at the gate asking to see me, a Miss Amelia Sterling. I had her brought in. She was thinner than I remembered, and the easy, effortless beauty was still there but worn somehow, frayed at the edges, like a beautiful dress that has been slept in. She came into the bright sitting room, the same room where my parents had taken their last tea, and she looked around at the house, at the glass, and the stone, and the quiet wealth of it, with an expression I knew at once, because I had spent my whole life watching her face. It was hunger. "Claire," she said, and her eyes filled with tears, easily, the way they always had. "Oh, Claire, I have made such a terrible mistake." The story came out in pieces. Between the tears, Marcus had not been what she thought. Marcus had been exactly what I had warned my mother he was. A charming man who finds rich girls and lives on them until the money runs out. He had taken Amelia abroad and lived on her, on the jewelry she had taken and the money she had stolen, on the last of my grandmother's drained trust that she had not even known was stolen, until it was gone, and when it was gone. So was Marcus. He had left her in a foreign city with a hotel bill she could not pay and a one-way understanding of how the world actually worked. She had come home. Our parents, she said, had taken her in but had been cold, blaming her, reminding her daily of what her flight had nearly cost them. And then she had heard, as everyone in those circles eventually heard, about my marriage, about the cold, powerful man who doted on his wife, about the house of glass and stone, about how spectacularly the substitute had landed. And so my sister had come to the gate, with hunger in her eyes, to see what might be reclaimed. I knew what she wanted before she said it. I had known from the moment Mrs. Condoyle spoke her name, but I let her come to it in her own time, because I had learned the power of letting people talk. It should have been me, she said at last, very quietly, looking at the room and not at me. The marriage. It was arranged for me. Julian was supposed to be mine. I know I ran. I know it was wrong. But I was confused. I was young. I was tricked by Marcus. And now you are here, in my place, in the life that was supposed to be mine. She looked up at me, and the tears were artful now, and underneath them I could see the old calculation. The same calculation I had watched on her face since we were children dividing sweets. I am not asking for anything unreasonable, she said. I just think, now that I am back, now that everyone can see I was led astray, that the family should, that you should, help me find my proper place again. You and Julian are so settled. You do not even love each other. Not really. It was just an arrangement. And Julian and I were the ones who were actually meant to. If you cared about the family, Claire, you would understand. You would step aside, the way you always have. You are so good at stepping aside. And there it was, the whole machine of my childhood, starting up again, exactly as it always had. Amelia wants the thing Claire has. Claire steps aside. The heart gets the flowers. The head goes back to its to-do list. It had happened 1,000 times, over sweets and toys and attention and love, and I now knew my grandmother's stolen trust. And it was happening again, in a house of glass, over a marriage and a man. And my sister had said it to my face with tears in her eyes. Certain, absolutely certain, that I would do what I had always done. I looked at my sister for a long moment, and I felt, rising in me, not rage, but something cooler and clearer and far more dangerous to her than rage would have been. I felt the end of my stepping aside, but I did not say it yet. I had learned patience from an old woman with dark eyes, and I had learned, from a man who read minds on paper, that you do not show your hand before the moment is right. So I did not refuse my sister that afternoon, and I did not agree. I said only, in a calm and even voice, "You must be tired, Amelia. You have had a long and difficult time. Stay for dinner. Julian will be home this evening. We will all talk." Her face lit with hope, she thought. I could see her think it, that she had won, that the soft, self-sacrificing Claire was already beginning to step aside. She thought she knew exactly who I was. She had no idea who I had become. Dinner that evening was a performance, and I let it run, because I wanted everyone at that table to show their true face before I showed mine. Amelia was radiant, whatever fraying the months with Marcus had done to her. She summoned her old self for that dinner, the beautiful, charming younger sister, full of light, telling stories, laughing.
turning the full force of her attention on Julian across the candlelit table. She had dressed carefully. She had done her hair the way she used to do it when she wanted something, and she set out, with all the skill of a lifetime of being adored,
to remind Julian Hawthorne of what he had supposedly been promised, and supposedly missed. I watched my husband watch my sister, and what I saw on his still, careful face was not interest, and not temptation, and not even dislike. What I saw was the cool, faintly bored attention of a man examining a thing he has already evaluated and found to be of no value. He answered Amelia's questions politely. He did not encourage her stories. When she laughed and touched his arm, he moved his arm, without unkindness, simply removing it from her reach, the way you might move a glass away from the edge of a table. He had read my sister. I understood. In about 90 seconds, the way he had once read a supply contract. And he had filed her away as a problem that did not require his attention. Amelia did not understand it. She had never in her life met a man who did not want her. And she did not have the equipment to recognize one when it sat across the table from her. So she pushed harder. And the harder she pushed against Julian's cool indifference, the more her composure frayed. Until, after dinner, when Julian had excused himself to take a call, and I was alone with my sister in the sitting room, the mask finally cracked. "I do not understand," she said, pacing, her voice rising. "He barely looked at me. He is supposed to. Men always. Why is he—" She turned on me. "What did you do?" she demanded. "What did you tell him about me? You poisoned him against me. Did you not? You have always been jealous of me, Claire. Always. Hiding it behind that quiet little face. And now you have him whispering lies in his ear so I cannot have what was mine." I said nothing. I let her run. "You think you are so clever," she said. And her voice had gone low and ugly now, the candlelight catching an expression on her lovely face that I had seen only in glimpses all my life, and that no one else had ever believed was there. "You think because some cold rich man married you to save the company that you are finally somebody, but you are not, Claire. You are the same boring, plain, useful nobody you have always been. He did not choose you. Nobody chooses you. He got stuck with you because I left, and now he is making the best of a bad situation. And the moment something better comes along, he will see exactly what the rest of us have always seen. You are a substitute. You will always be a substitute. You are the thing people settle for when the thing they actually wanted runs away." The room was very quiet. And from the doorway, in her low, dry, unhurried voice, a third person spoke. "How interesting," said Iris Hawthorne. I had not heard her come in. Neither had Amelia. My sister spun around, the ugliness still on her face, and found the old woman standing in the doorway with her dark eyes fixed on her. Having heard, I understood at once, every word. Behind Iris, in the hall, stood Julian, his call finished, his face like stone. And behind him, half in shadow, stood Mrs. Doyle, who had shown my sister in that afternoon, and who had, I would learn later, made very sure that the family would be standing exactly there, at exactly that moment, to hear exactly what my sister was. Amelia's face went white. She scrambled, the way she always scrambled, the tears rushing back, the voice climbing into wounded innocence. "Oh, I did not mean. I was upset. Claire and I were only. It is a private family matter. We were just—" "You were just," said Iris Hawthorne, "telling my granddaughter-in-law that she is a thing people settle for." The old woman walked slowly into the room, and small and straight-backed as she was, she seemed to fill it. Let me tell you something about my grandson, young woman. Since you understand him so poorly, Julian Hawthorne has never settled for anything in his life. He could have married any beautiful, charming, empty girl in this country. They lined up for years. He turned them all away. And then he found one person, exactly one, whose mind and whose character he judged worthy of the only thing he truly values, which is his trust. He chose her, deliberately, over the course of 3 years, before he had ever seen her face. He did not get stuck with Claire. He arranged his entire life to make sure he would end up with her. You were never the thing he wanted. You were the obstacle. And the day you ran away with your charming thief, you did not break my grandson's heart. You did him the single greatest favor of his life. Amelia stared at her, trembling. Then she looked at Julian, standing in the doorway with his face of stone. "Julian," she whispered, "tell them it is not." "Every word my grandmother said," Julian said quietly, "is true. I chose Claire. I will always choose Claire. You were never anything to me but a name in a contract I rewrote so that I would not have to marry you. I am sorry if that is cruel. It is also the truth. And you have just spent 10 minutes being far crueler to a far better woman. So I find I do not have much sympathy to spare." He stepped into the room and came to stand beside me. Not in front of me, to shield me. As if I needed shielding, beside me, as a partner. "I think," he said, "that it is time for you to go home, Amelia." My sister looked around the room, at the old woman who had weighed her and found her worthless, at the man who had never wanted her, at the housekeeper in the hall who had quietly made sure the truth would be heard, and finally, at me, the substitute, the nobody, the thing people settle for, standing calm and unbroken beside my husband in a house of glass. For just a moment, something flickered across her face that was not calculation, and not rage, but something younger and more frightened. The look of a person who has just discovered, far too late, that the story she has been telling herself her whole life is not true, that she is not the heart everyone keeps for love, that she is a beautiful, spoiled, frightened girl who has just thrown away her last chance at being loved, by being exactly what she has always been, in front of the only people who might have helped her. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She left without another word. When she had gone, the room was quiet. Iris Hawthorne came to me, and she took my hand in both of her small dry ones, and she looked up at me with her dark eyes. "There," she said, "now you have heard it said out loud, in front of witnesses, by the people who matter. You are not a substitute. Claire, you never were. You are the one they were all too blind to see." She squeezed my hand. "Do not ever again let anyone, especially anyone who shares your blood, tell you otherwise." "I will not," I said, and for the first time in my life, I knew that it was true. The reckoning with my father came 2 weeks later, and it came, fittingly, in a boardroom. The merger of Sterling and Company into the Hawthorne Group had reached its final stage, the stage where the last documents were signed and the old company formally passed into the new structure. My father had been looking forward to this day for months. In his mind, it was the day his rescue became permanent, the day his debts vanished for good, the day he could finally stop pretending to understand his own company and simply enjoy being a respected name attached to a powerful one. He arrived at the Hawthorne offices in his finest suit, expecting a celebration. He found, instead, me. I was sitting at the head of the long table when he was shown in, with Julian on one side and the Hawthorne lawyers on the other, and a thick folder open in front of me. My father's step faltered when he saw me there, in that seat, with that folder. He had grown used, over the months, to thinking of me as his daughter who had married well. He had not yet adjusted to the idea of me as a person who sat at the head of tables. "Sit down, Father," I said, not unkindly. "There are some things we need to settle before the final signatures." He sat. What followed was not a shouting match. I want you to understand that. I had imagined, in my old life, the life before the letters and the house of glass, that if I ever confronted my father, it would be with years of swallowed anger pouring out of me all at once. But that is not how it went, because that is not who I had become. I confronted my father the way Julian Hawthorne had taught me to confront anything, calmly, precisely. With the documents open on the table, I walked him through it, page by page. I showed him the clause his lawyers had tried to bury in the merger, the one that would have shifted his hidden liabilities onto the Hawthorne Group, the small greedy sleight of hand I had caught in my first week. I told him that it had been removed, and that the liabilities would remain exactly where they belonged. With him, I showed him the records of my grandmother's trust, every withdrawal, every coin of my half of it. Spent over 6 years on a sister who had then run away. I did not weep over it. I simply laid it on the table, in the cool, clear light of a boardroom, where the numbers could not lie and could not be smoothed over with talk of family and self-sufficiency. I told him that the Hawthorne lawyers had reviewed it, and that what he had done as trustee was not merely unfair but unlawful, and that the matter was now documented and held, and would be handled properly, through the proper channels, in its own time. And then I showed him the new structure of the company. "Sterling and Company will survive," I said. "Every one of the 200 people who work there will keep their jobs. Grandmother's name will stay on the door. I have made sure of all of that, because those people matter, and that name matters, and a great deal of my life went into keeping them alive. But you, Father, will no longer run it. You have been given a title, and an income that is generous and more than fair, and no operational control whatsoever. The company that grandmother built and that you nearly destroyed will be run by people who actually understand it, including me." My father stared at the documents. "You cannot do this," he said, but the bluster had gone out of his voice. "You cannot just. I am your father. That company is mine. You have no right." "I have every right," I said. "I have the right that comes from 3 years of holding it together while you took the credit. I have the right that comes from being the eldest Sterling daughter, named in a contract I did not write, but that turned out to describe me exactly. And I have the right, Father, that comes from finally understanding that being your daughter was always a job, and that I am allowed to set the terms of my own employment." I closed the folder. "These are the terms," I said. "They are fair. They are far more generous than you have earned. You may sign them, and keep your title and your income and your dignity, and we will say no more about the trust in public, and you will be allowed to retire as a respected man. Or you may refuse them, and contest all of it, and we will let the matter of the trust be settled in the full light of day, where everyone can see exactly how a man spent his own mother's gift to one granddaughter on the other. The choice, as someone once taught me, is yours, and yours alone, to make freely." The boardroom was very quiet. My father looked at me for a long time, and in his face, slowly, I watched something happen that I had never seen there before. I watched him understand that the daughter he had spent 26 years overlooking had become, somehow, while he was not paying attention, the most formidable person in the room. I watched him understand that the head he had used for free his whole life had finally, fully, become its own. He signed the terms. When it was done, When the last document was signed and the lawyers had gathered their papers and filed out, my father sat alone at the long table for a moment, an old man in a fine suit, and he looked at me, and he said, in a voice I had never heard him use, a small and uncertain voice, "Your grandmother always said you were the one to watch." I never understood what she meant. I thought she was being unkind to your sister. He shook his head slowly. I think I have misunderstood a great many things. It was not an apology. My father was not capable of a true apology, and I had long since stopped needing one from him. But it was something. It was the closest thing to seeing me that he had ever managed. And I found, to my surprise, that I could accept it for what it was, a small and late and incomplete acknowledgement, without needing it to be more. I had spent my whole life waiting for my family to see me. I no longer needed them to. That, it turned out, was the difference between the old life and the new one. Not the house of glass, not the powerful husband, not the company I now help to run. The difference was that I had stopped waiting at a door that was never going to open, and had walked, instead, through all the doors that had been standing open the whole time, behind me, where I had never thought to look. The seasons turned, and turned again, and somewhere in the turning, a whole year had gone by. It did not feel like time passing. It felt like a house being built, plank by plank, in a place where I had never once expected to be allowed to build anything at all. Sterling and Company thrived under the Hawthorne structure, freed from my father's mismanagement. Run by people who understood it, including me, it became, within that year, something my grandmother would have been proud of. The 200 families kept their work, and there were soon more than 200. Her name stayed on the door, and I made sure, in 100 small ways, that the company behind the name became worthy of it again. I divided my time between the Sterling offices and the broader work of the Hawthorne Group, where Julian had, true to his word, made me a real partner, in the business and in everything else. The cold, difficult man who read minds on paper turned out to be, in private, with the one person he had chosen. Neither cold nor difficult at all. I will not pretend the love arrived in a single moment, because it did not. It arrived the way the strongest things arrive, slowly and quietly, and so steadily that I could not have told you the day it became undeniable. But there came an evening, late in that first year, when I was sitting in his study going over documents, and he was reading in the chair across from mine, and I looked up at him in the lamplight and felt a contentment so complete and so unfamiliar that it frightened me. And I understood that somewhere in the long, strange correspondence of our marriage, I had fallen entirely in love with my husband, and that he, in his careful, deliberate, undemonstrative way, had loved me since before he ever saw my face. We did not need to make a great announcement of it. We had begun with honesty on paper, and we went on with honesty in person, and that, it turned out, was a far better foundation for love than any of the grand romantic beginnings I had once read about and envied. I had been chosen for my mind, and then for my character, and only then, last of all, for my heart. And I have come to believe that is the right order, and the order that lasts. Iris Hawthorne lived to see all of it, which gave me more joy than almost anything else. She and I became, over that year, something close to what she had clearly always wanted and never had. A true companionship between two women who saw each other clearly. She told me, near the end of the year, that she could die content now, having finally seen a Hawthorne man choose well. And I told her, sharply, that she was not permitted to die for at least another decade. And she laughed. The dry, low laugh that her grandson had inherited, and said she would consider it. My father retired, as the terms allowed. A respected man, he never ran anything again. I am told he tells a version of the story, at parties, in which he brilliantly arranged a great marriage and a great merger and saved the family through his own foresight. I let him tell it. The truth does not need me to defend it. It sits quietly in the company's books, and the company's success, and the company's 200 and growing families. And it will outlast every story my father tells. The matter of my grandmother's trust was settled. In time. In the proper and unglamorous way that such things are settled. Through lawyers and quiet agreements. With my half restored to me from what my father could provide. I did not need the money. I had a house of glass and a partnership in an empire. But I took it anyway. Every coin of it. Not because I needed it, but because it was the last gift of the one person who saw me. And I was finished letting anyone tell me that I did not need the things that were mine. And my sister, Amelia, did not transform into a better person overnight. I want to be honest about that. Because I have grown tired of stories where the selfish are made gentle by a single bad season. She remained, for a long while, much as she had always been. But the months with Marcus and the night in the house of glass had cracked something in her. And through the crack, slowly, a little light began to get in. She could not go back to being the adored younger sister, because the adoration was gone, spent, vanished along with the trust and the charm and the certainty that the world would always forgive her. She had to learn, for the first time, to be a person rather than a darling, and it was hard for her, and she was not good at it. And there were many setbacks. But she tried. That was the new thing. She got a job, an ordinary job, and kept it. Badly at first, and then less badly. She paid back. In small, careful amounts, some of what she had taken. Not because anyone forced her to, but because, she told me once, in a rare, honest moment, she could not stand the way it felt to have taken it. We are not close. My sister and I do not think we will ever be close. Too much was broken, too early, by people who taught us to compete for a love that should have been freely given to both of us. But we are no longer enemies. She no longer asks me to step aside, and I no longer step. We have arrived, after everything, at a careful, distant, honest peace. And for two sisters raised the way we were raised, that is no small thing. It may even be a kind of victory. On the anniversary of the strangest wedding in the history of my family, Julian and I drove out to the quiet place where my grandmother is buried. I had never been able to visit her grave properly in the old years. There had never been time. And there had never been anyone to drive me. And the invisible daughter does not ask for things like time, or a car, or company. But that day, I went, with my husband beside me. And I stood at the stone of the hard, brilliant woman who had built a company and seen a granddaughter when no one else bothered to look. And I told her, quietly, everything that had happened. I told her that her company was safe, and her name was on the door, and the door led somewhere good again. I told her that her last gift to me, the trust, had been stolen, but that the real gift, the gift of being seen, had survived everything, exactly as a man had once promised me it would. I told her that I had stopped waiting at the door that never opened, and I told her, last of all, that I had finally understood the thing she must have known about me all along, the thing she left me a trust to make possible, the thing it took a runaway bride and a substitute wedding and 3 years of letters for me to learn. I was never the substitute, I said to the quiet stone. I was never the thing they settled for. I was the one they were too blind to see. And the day my sister ran from her wedding, she did not hand me her life by mistake. She handed me my own. The wind moved through the trees. Julian's hand found mine.
I did not take my sister's place that day, I said, to my grandmother, and to myself, and to the quiet autumn air.
I took my own. Then I rested my hand flat against the cool face of the stone. And I held it there for a while. The way you hold the hand of someone you are not ready to stop talking to. And I walked back down to the car. And to the house I had built, plank by plank. In the place I had never expected to be allowed to build anything. Not a borrowed house. Not a stand-in for a life meant for someone else. A life that belonged to me, by right, and by my own two hands. Thank you for listening to today's story. If it moved you, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you in the next story.